But has anybody been impacted by suicide in this room? No. Okay, so if you haven't, well, keep your hands up for just a second. I would encourage everybody who doesn't have their hand up, just look around. Because AFSP, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, says that the average suicide affects no less than 100 people. And there's less than 100 people in this room. Look how many hands are up. I can tell you, at my son's funeral, we had approximately 500 people show up for 2 wakes, or 2 visitations. The procession was a mile long. He impacted a lot of people. Anybody know the stats of suicide? How many people take their own lives in a given day? Given year? So the latest stats that AFSP will tell you was based on 2016. In 2016, 46,000 Americans took their own life. 1 every 12 minutes. It's astounding. Maryland, we're lucky. We don't hear about it a whole lot in the news, right? Because we're on the low end of the spectrum. When you're listed from worst to best, best being the lower rate of suicide, Maryland's at the very bottom, number 47th out of 50 states. Maryland has 1 every 15 hours, which means in the worst states, Montana, Alaska, Washington State, the average isn't 1 in every 12, it's more like 1 in every 6 or 7 minutes. So this is important. If you haven't run into it yet in your life, then likely you will. I was fortunate. I didn't lose anybody until I lost my son. My wife lost 3 people before she got out of high school. So we have different experiences as well as all of you do. So on July 28th of this year, my son Joshua, who was 20 years old, without any recognizable warning signs, took his own life. In the aftermath of that tragedy, exactly 30 days later, my wife and I had decided we wanted to do something to prevent this from happening to other families. So we founded our foundation, the Joshua York Legacy Foundation. I put cards on everybody's chair because that tells you what we're trying to do. There's also more if you want to take some with you. We were pretty aggressive. I'm a CPA by trade. I've been an accountant most of my life. She's a business analyst. So we dove right in. I didn't have to go back to work because I had worked the last 6 months prior to that, 350 hours of overtime in my job, all for comp time. So I just told my boss, I'm not coming back until that comp time's gone, until I've established the foundation and had my first major fundraiser and was starting to make a difference. I just started back to work more than 1 day a week last week. So it's taken me about 90 days to get to that point. And I still get the tidal waves. Emotionally, they come. And if you've been affected by it, you probably already know that. So 64 days into our journey, the IRS gave us our IRS letter of determination, letting us know that we're an official 501c3 and able to take donations from everybody for public charity. That's pretty astounding. Most nonprofits take anywhere from 6 months on the fast end to about 2 years. So we've been working really hard. To date, just to give you some information, we've raised $12,000 in 90 days, $6,000 in the first 19 days. We've additionally got about $4,000 in what they call in-kind contributions, which are when someone gives you a service or gives you a product, supplies to operate your business. So we've raised $4,000 in that way, most of which has been mine because I keep putting it in. I want to save lives. We're again, nonprofit. We're here and we're dedicated to suicide awareness and prevention through outreach, education, and improving mental health care. I'm not going to get into it yet any deeper than that because you'll hear why. You'll understand why, I'm sure, by the end of what I want to tell you. But before I get into anything more, I have to be honest, I'm compelled to give you a warning because this story is not an easy story. It's not one easy always for me to tell. I may get emotional. I got my tissues. You're welcome to one if you need them. And so I know it's not always easy to hear. If you've been affected, it may bring up emotions. If you haven't, you may not know how to deal with what you're feeling. So I tell you that in advance because my hope is that you'll stick with me. My hope is that you'll hold on and grab the hand of your friend next to you if you need to. You don't wipe the tears, but come back, because what I'm trying to do is through this process, not only tell you my story, which is healing to me, but also let you know what to expect in life, give you a couple things that I've learned in 52 years of living that may help you when you hit your valley. So, I hope you can stick with it. So let's begin with a little story. Has anybody been to Colorado or Kansas? Okay. What part of Colorado?
Denver.
Denver, so the Rockies, right? Any other part?
Fort Collins.
Okay. Okay. So if you haven't been out there, if you only learned it from a map, the topography of Colorado and Kansas, right? So you got these huge rocky mountains with snow caps. Sometimes they're there all year long, right? Big jagged rocks, and the storms build up on the west side of the Rocky Mountains. And when they wisp over the mountains, they come rushing down in some pretty fantastic storms, either through rain or snow, across the Kansas plains, the Great Plains of Kansas. That area of our world is very unique because it's the only place in the world where you see cows and buffaloes in close proximity to each other. And I tell you that for this reason. When those storms come rushing over the Rocky Mountains and onto the plains, if you were there to witness it, the first thing you'd see when the storms are coming is the cows will panic and they'll start running. Anybody seen cows run before? Do they run very far, very fast? No. And when they run out of energy, which doesn't take too long, they slow down, but they keep walking away from the storm because they don't want to be in the storm. But they're slow. Eventually that storm catches up with them and it passes over them. And they continue to walk with the storm. They stay in the storm longer. Now the buffalo, they got a different instinct. When that storm, when the weather comes over those mountains and starts rushing down into them, just like the cow, they sense it. But they literally run towards the storm. They don't walk, they don't stand still, they start running towards the storm. And they run and run and run, and the storm's coming towards them, and it passes over them. They don't stay in the storm for very long. And that's kind of how life is. Life is challenging. We face our challenges. You guys don't have the years that I have, but I guarantee you have the challenges. Whether it be your next final exam, a relationship you're in, something happening at home, you have your challenges. So you have a choice to make. Do you choose to be the cow, or do you choose to be the buffalo? Because a cow, you have three choices in life. You can be the cow and run away from the storm. It's going to catch you. You're going to live through the experience that you're destined to live through. But the longer you run away from it, the longer you're going to experience the stress factors that you're experiencing. Or you could be neither, and you could shelter in place and hide and just wait for the storm to pass. You don't learn anything. You're hiding, and it passes over you. And when it's gone, you recognize it's gone at some point. You wake up and say, "Shoo, glad I survived it." But you didn't learn anything from it. You learned how to hide it. Well, you can be the buffalo, and you can recognize that you're going to have these experiences. You're going to have things that challenge you in your life. Yes, they're going to be difficult. Yes, they're going to be stressful. Yes, it may be the first time you've ever experienced it in your life. But I guarantee you, if you look around this room, you have friends, you have family. There are people there who will support you. And it'll be tougher for a shorter period of time. And when you get to the other side, because you've pushed your limits to get through that storm, you will have learned something about yourself. You will have grown. You will know that you can do this easier the next time. Because life doesn't always get easier just because you've gotten older, just because you've had a job. It changes constantly. So my advice is simply to be the buffalo. Think about it every time you're facing a challenge. Just say to yourself, be the buffalo. So I want to tell you a little about my life, because my life has been full of challenges. And to get to know why I'm able to be here today, I think you need to understand the kind of person I am and where I came from and what I've become. So I'm the youngest of 5 siblings from my biological parents. And my sister over there is the middle one. I got a brother 10 years older than me. And then my father got remarried, so I have a half-sister. She's probably, 10 years younger? Sure. Yeah. So, before I entered the first grade, my mother left my father. He was running around. She found out she couldn't deal with it anymore. She had to leave. And I can remember very succinctly that moment that she packed all her belongings in about 6 green grocery bags and threw them in our station wagon that she had just learned to drive at about 35 for the first time in her life and drove away. It was before I was in kindergarten. That was such a significant emotional event for me personally that I can remember it vividly at 52 years old. And I had nightmares about it, anxiety nightmares, well into my teens. As I said, we stopped going to church. My father, he worked, he continued to go out. So my oldest sister ended up having to take on the mother role. My other sisters helped maintain the house. Okay? So, me, I don't have many memories of it. Most of what I know has been told to me by my sisters. Not conversations that people get into, right? So, a few years later, my mother did eventually gain custody of all of us, and we moved into a neighbor's attic at first until we could find subsidized government housing, and money was scarce because back then I think my father provided my mother $150 a month for 5 kids. 140, there you go. I can tell you, I can remember as in my early teens, of course we wore Tom McCann's, which were basically cheap shoes back then because they were locally produced. But I can remember sewing the heels by hand of my shoe back to my canvas tennis shoes because I knew my mother didn't have enough money to buy a new pair of shoes. So I didn't tell her when the shoes fell off my feet until I couldn't sew them anymore. As I said, we moved into subsidized housing. Well, we lived in the county when my parents got married. We moved down to Middle River. Anybody from the Middle River area? No Maple Crest? Okay, so here's a scrawny, I'm not a big guy, right? Here's a scrawny little guy, about 90 pounds, moving into subsidized housing with a whole mix of people coming out of subsidized housing. And I had no clue how to live in that environment. I was bullied from day one until the last day we moved out of there 3 days later. My bike was stolen from me practically every single day of my life for 3 years straight. At about 12, I think it was, we moved again. My mother, my sister, and my brother, the older two, put together the funds that they had and they bought a house for the family. And we moved back to Parkville. I actually got to start going to school with some of the kids I went to first, second, and third grade with, but I didn't know them anymore. So I didn't have any of those friendships anymore. Yeah, I started to meet new kids in the neighborhood, but those original kids, I couldn't connect with them. I was not in a good place. By 15, I ended up cutting off my father pretty much completely. And then when I turned 16, I got my first real job. $3.25 an hour, stocking shelves in a liquor store. Great place for a 16-year-old to work, right? By the time I reached my senior year, I worked 7 days a week. From the time I got out of school, 4 o'clock in the afternoon till 10 o'clock at night. Friday, I worked till midnight. Saturday, 10 in the morning till midnight. Sunday, 10 in the morning till 10 at night. School was not a priority for me. But I was a turnkey kid. My mother needed money, the family needed money. We worked when we could. So my mother got up before me, went to work. I got up, went to school, came home, turned the key, walked in the door. My sisters were home. They were making dinner. If I didn't have to work early on, it wasn't that way. Once I started making money and had to make $4.25 an hour, I worked as much as I could. Didn't spend a whole lot, but I worked a lot. Money became the priority for me. And as a senior, I'm working with 20 and 21-year-olds, 25-year-olds, 26-year-olds. Drinking became a priority for me. By the time I reached my senior year, I worked every day, as many hours as I could, and I drank every night because I had to fall asleep somehow by the time I got home so I could get up and go to school. School was my priority. I went to Eastern Voc Tech. I was there for computer programming. It was a great programming, right? I couldn't complete it because I couldn't do the work. So I slept during my class, so much that I had the principal wake me up one day and said, why do you fall asleep every day? It's such a waste of time. It's such a waste of effort from this school. And I looked up at him and I said, yeah, I know, but I need my sleep, and it's a waste of my effort if I stay up, because I'm not going to graduate with this program under my belt. I just want to get through high school. And then one day the military recruiter showed up. And a friend of mine said, hey, you want to go talk to the Marines? I said, yeah. Talk to them. What else I got to do, right? Do I want to work 7 days a week for the rest of my life? So we agreed to go on the buddy program into the Marines. Well, we talked to him, we started going through the process, took the ASVAB. Come December, my buddy backed out. And I got scared because I didn't want to be a Marine by myself. I wanted to have somebody to lean on, right? So my mother talked me into talking to my uncle who retired from the Air Force, and he told me how easy it was in the Air Force, so I went in the Air Force. At the time, the reason I made that choice, we had no money for me to go to college. Out of the 5 kids, my oldest sister was the only one who had been in college at that point. Okay. She now got her PhD, by the way. But there was no money for me. I wasn't motivated to go to college. Nobody had talked to me how to get into college, much less what was college about, right? I was living day to day. I had no self-esteem. I had no value for my own life. I had been suicidal, but I had never talked about it to any of my family or any of my friends. I used to go climb up this big rock and just wish I had the courage to jump. But I never did. I didn't have the courage, for one. I didn't want to leave my siblings because we were all struggling. And so with no self-esteem, no value for my own life, I joined the military. It was the best of both worlds at that moment because, one, I could serve my country. They were going to feed me. They were going to house me. I was going to learn something. And if I had to go to war, I could die honorably. That's how I thought about my life. The best thing that could have happened to me was to go die in war. That was the best. That's all I had hoped for myself. I was the cow because I wasn't facing any of my fears. I was running from every single one of them and didn't know it. Going into the service, which I thought was going to save me from where I was just an extension of being the cow. Because I wasn't going in there to learn or overcome anything. I was going in there to escape. Because of what I didn't feel important to anybody. So, going in the military, you're going to get changed. And I got changed pretty quick because they expected something from me. Every day, they expected something from me. And if you didn't give it, you're in trouble. I learned to do a lot of push-ups. I learned to take on extra duties so that I wouldn't get harassed because I was the small guy. Right? Still a small guy that walk in front of the whole flight carrying a flag because I'm the shortest guy in the flight. 5'5". True story. When I went to go through the in-processing, they made me wear my tennis shoes because I weighed 129 pounds and you had to weigh 130 to go through the door. So they made me put my shoes on so I could weigh in correctly. So my self-esteem did begin to grow. I got confident. I began performing ahead of my peers. I was doing accounting work. I learned that in high school to do programming. I actually love accounting. I love what numbers are about. So I started to excel. And it brought me a lot of recognition. In the military, they're really good about recognizing people who work hard. So I kept getting these awards, Airman of the Month, Airman of the Quarter, put up for Airman of the Year, being told that I looked the best than anybody that they had ever seen in uniform. That I knew my job better than everybody else. Tell me, I went in as an E1, lowest rank. And by the time I was an E3, they were like, we can't wait till you make E5 so that you can go to headquarters and audit other people who are doing your work. You're that good, stick with it. I got about 4 years in and they came to us and said, Grand Rudman Act, you got to either re-enlist for another 4 years or you got to get out 6 months early. I was planning to get out 4 years. And I got a month to make a life-changing decision. My then wife was in college. She wasn't even going to finish her college to July. I had no choice. If we were going to excel as a family, she had to finish her college, which means I had to do another 4 years of service. I had a boss I hated. He didn't know the job. They'd done a lot of changes, and I got this guy who didn't know anything. So I saw an opportunity. I applied for a special duty assignment as a federal criminal investigator within the Air Force, became a special agent about a year later, and I was off and running on adventures. I still didn't have a lot of value. I still had that thought, man, it would be the best I can do, is the best honor I can bring to my family is to die in war. And I took an opportunity to go through what they call protective services, operations training, and anti-terrorism. So, if you think about the Secret Service, that's what I got to do. I got to drive cars a foot off the bumper in front of me at 65 miles an hour. Somebody would jump out of the bushes, let off a smoke grenade, or fire off a blank and a gun, and you'd have to slam on your brakes, spin the cars around, and get going the opposite way. It was a blast. I got to ram vehicles in yellow cars. It was a blast. And then they taught me about anti-terrorism. And then the Gulf War went up. And my life changed again. Because on August 16th, at 3 o'clock in the morning, after having my friends just leave my house from a night of game playing and drinks, at about 1 o'clock in the morning, I got a call that said, be at the office at 7 o'clock in the morning. Pack your uniforms, pack your civilian clothes. If you don't have a boot knife, you're gonna need a boot knife, and you're probably gonna have to get your hair cut. And so I went in the office at 7 o'clock in the morning. By 10 o'clock in the morning, my head was shaved bald again, shorter than it is now. I'd been issued uniforms. They didn't have my size. I was a small guy. They issued me large uniforms. I got uniforms that are hanging off my body. They issued me chem warfare gear that I'd never been trained to use. I'm claustrophobic, by the way. They gave me my 9mm service pistol and an M16 and about 3,000 rounds of ammunition, and told me, I'm at New Jersey, Fort Dix McGuire. You have to be at Dover Air Force Base by 10 o'clock. The out process. I quickly called my family and said, I'm going to war. If you want to see me, you've got about an hour and a half to get to Dover, or you're not going to see me. They got there. I had maybe a half hour with them. I bought my boot knife, put all my stuff on a pallet, got my shots, and through the fence about 2 hours later, I said goodbye to my family, and I was off. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 13 hours later, I was in the air. Went to Germany, to Saudi Arabia, ended up in Oman, where I lived in a tent for 7 months, living the same life, day in, day out. The same life, literally. Get up in the morning, walk to the shower, get a shower, walk out of the shower, going back to your tent to get dressed for the day, have a windstorm blow up and coat you with dust. Got the stink away though. Go back to the tent, eat breakfast, go do my briefings, go interact with the people I need to do, go eat lunch, work out, run, exercise, maybe catch a nap, go eat dinner, watch the Jungle Book movie, because that's the kind of stuff we had to watch over there for entertainment. Go back to sleep and do it all again. Every night going to bed never knowing whether the next day was going to be Groundhog Day again, or if I was going to get picked up and get told that I had to go north into Iraq or Kuwait. 7 months I lived that way. And then all of a sudden, one day in March, I got the same kind of message. Sleeping, guy wakes me up and says, "York, where you been?" What are you talking about? I'm right here in my bunk. You gotta get your stuff together, pack it up. We need you to get down the flight line, you're going home. I literally looked at him and I said, if you're lying to me, I'm going to kill you. Don't make me pack up, I was sleeping on the couch, we're playing tricks on each other. Don't make me pack up my stuff, because I had a big 3-foot trunk. Don't make me pack up my stuff if there's no plane there. And wouldn't you know it, there was a plane there. And I got thrown on a plane. 10 minutes later, I was up in the air, flew to Saudi Arabia, flew to Egypt, flew to Europe, still wearing the same uniform. 24 hours later, maybe 36, lost track of time, and I get to Europe, and they say, hey, we need to take your M16. Unless you can't take my M16. You have to, you can't get on the plane. So for 3 hours, I argued with the commander over there, because my weapons weren't issued in mass, they were issued to me individually. And I couldn't give them up. Not to mention, it was one of the few possessions I had for 7 months. You don't give up something when it's your last possession that may save your life. So, they finally convinced me that they would take my ammunition from me, that I could carry the automatic firing pin in my pocket for my M16 if I stuffed it in my duffel bag, and I could wear my 9mm since they had taken my munitions. I had none. And I got on a civilian plane with about 500 other guys, and we flew to some base up in the Northeast, and the next thing I know, I was in Philadelphia, and I get off the plane, and I'm waiting for my duffel bag to come out, and my duffel bag doesn't come out, and I'm starting to freak out, because my M16's in my duffel bag. I'm responsible for that. If that gets lost, I'm responsible for it. Finally, after God knows how many hours, the manager says, "Hey, we're shutting down this terminal. And are you the York guy? Because there's like 60 people waiting for you." What are you talking about? I can't leave. I need my M16. You have to tell me before I will leave this terminal where my M16 is. That's how fixated I was. Sure enough, I came out. All my family, all my friends were there. You know, I got deployed in less than 24 hours with no notice. I came home in less than 24 hours with no notice. I got introduced to my family as soon as I got off the plane. I was back to work the very next day. They never gave me any counseling. They never asked me if I had experienced anything traumatic, which I had. And I was back in society. I was walking around as a time bomb. I was angry. I, again, didn't care what I was doing. I just wanted to get away from everybody else who was complaining that they had a warm coat. Because Lord knows I didn't have a coat for 7 months. Give me a warm one, I'd appreciate it. So I learned to mask all that. I had tremors throughout my whole body. If I had a conversation like this, my whole arm would ripple and my back. And I learned to tighten up my muscles and hide it. And if people noticed, they didn't ask about it. And if they did, it was a passing remark, and I was able to get past it. So I learned to hide it really well for about 15 years. Had a couple of kids after I realized that I wasn't exposed to all the toxins, and I didn't have to worry about having a deformed baby or anything like that, because that was a real fear when I came back. Finished my college here at the University of Baltimore. Got a successful job, a series of successful jobs, made more money year after year. Life was good. Or was it? Because the fact is, it wasn't. I had never addressed that significant emotional event of my mother leaving before I was in kindergarten. Never had an opportunity for that. Never even thought about it. But that inner child was there. I never addressed PTSD. Never had the opportunity to. Nobody ever, if I would have addressed it once I was back, they'd have kicked me out of the service. I couldn't do it. So I took all those emotions, just like most people do, and I took that little inner child for those significant emotions, and I put them in a box, and I locked it down, and I wrapped it with the biggest, strongest emotional chains that I could, locked it, and threw away the key, and there it sat, deep in the recesses of me. And there's a lot of people that walk around like that. And I was good, because I was going from job to job to job, making more money. But I wasn't, because the reality was, I was changing jobs every 12 to 18 months. Why? Because I didn't have a relationship with my father, and I couldn't take and resolve that issue in a workplace. When the boss pissed me off, I left. I didn't have time to resolve it. I found a better paying job. Everybody thought I was doing good because I kept making more money. Then 9/11 hit, right? The world changed just from how we viewed things in America. You guys probably remember it from a different perspective. You were little. Right? Any of you not born on 9/11? Born after 9/11? Right, so, I'm an old eyewitness and I thought, I'm getting called back up to duty. So 9/11 hit, changes my life. I get laid off, go back in the military, and as I go back in the military, I find out my then wife was having an affair after 16 years of marriage. And by the way, it was with a woman. I didn't know she was gay. Right? right down to the pits. Because now I question everything I knew and trusted my entire 16-year marriage. These things happen in the world, but not to me. That's what I thought. It was so bad that I started having suicidal thoughts again. I called the hotline one night because I knew if I didn't call the hotline and talk to somebody, that I'd have left my children alone in a hotel room 300 miles away from the people who loved them. Because that's where I was. I was in Williamsburg, Virginia, alone with my kids, taking them on a trip when the rock hit me. And I couldn't leave them. I got back from that. I gave my wife an ultimatum: decide what you want to do, whether you want a family with these kids or not. We tried to repair a relationship, and then she went back to her ways again, and I had a DWI because I didn't care anymore. I had thrown it away again, but the DWI woke me up because I had to go to counseling for alcoholism. That's part of my DWI. And I made a promise to myself when I had to take my boy into the courtroom because he was with me the one day, that I was going to make a difference. I would never be the cow again. I was always going to be the buffalo, no matter how hard, no matter what it was, I would be the buffalo. And that's why I'm here today. My new wife, who I had met after my divorce and separation, we ended up having 2 girls. And we tried to raise our older 2 kids as best we could in families where the children are going back and forth between houses because there's divorce. I'm sure that some of you know, if it's not yourself, have experienced that, right? There's no consistency in both houses. Hard to have consistency when you're divorced. People are pissed at each other. You know? It's hard not as a kid to not play one over the other at some point to get what you really want. It's not intentional. You're a kid. Right? I know I did it with my parents, but my parents divorced. It's the normal process. But we kept trying. And we were doing a pretty good job. Joshua was our second born. He was my second born. So he was 20 years old this past summer. He had these insanely blue eyes. He was handsome. And he had a really sweet disposition. He was his sister's rock. His sister's the oldest one. When she struggled, he was there. He was the playmate of my girls and like the best big brother to his adopted brother you could imagine. He loved him because it was the brother he always wanted. When the girls were born, he cried because he wanted a brother. But he got 2 sisters. My boy was gay. He thought we didn't know it. Right? If you're sitting in this room and that's your disposition in life, embrace it. Have those conversations. My son tried to hide it. We knew it. He didn't bring friends around. Hey, hello. Right? Even you could tell every time he was around the girls that they saw him as a girlfriend, not a boyfriend, because he was no risk to them. They loved him. That boy had more girlfriends than I had ever known women in my entire 52 years of living. And they were pretty, right? It's crazy. In his senior year, he was struggling with that. He didn't feel comfortable talking to us, although, again, his mother was gay and remarried to a woman. So he couldn't have the conversation there. And over here, I'm military, right? Married with more kids, and he couldn't come to me. And we knew it. We were just waiting. The door was always open. We actually dropped hints once in a while. But he wouldn't take the bait and have the conversation. He was embarrassed. He didn't know how to fit in. And so, on one fateful day, he told us when he was staying with us, "Hey, Dad, do you mind if I stay over at Jess and Bud's? Their parents are down in Ocean City. There's a bunch of people staying there." Jess and Bud's were great friends. They were twins, one boy, one girl. And they were great friends to him. And they hung with him all the time. In fact, one time I picked him up drove 2.5 hours because I had a flat tire in Pennsylvania. Got up early, picked him up, fixed his tire, got them all home safe. So I thought, yeah, no problem. Well, the next morning I found out that he did go over there, But he was using one of those dating apps, right? Checking everything out, trying to connect with somebody. Who doesn't want to have a love relationship, especially at 17? Right? He got a dating app, he met up with the person, and he got raped. His very first time that he was trying to connect with people who he thought were in his community, somebody took advantage of him. And he wasn't going to tell me. His friends called their father, who was a cop, who was down the ocean, and the father called me because they didn't know what to do. And then we had to figure out how to get into the hospital to get the rape test kicked on. And you know, even after all that, he still thought we thought he was straight. You know, we talked to the cops right there. We helped him through the process. And he still tried to hide that in the veil. He didn't want to press charges. He's 17, I can't make him. Can't make the state do it because he's the victim. So all we could do was support him. Not something I wanted to do, because Lord knows I wanted to kill the person who injured my child. So much so that I went back to counseling, because one day I was sitting outside the place that I thought the person lived and thinking of how can I get this duty taken care of. And I got home, my wife said, "Where have you been?" "Well, I just went to Target." She said, "You've been gone for 4 hours. Where have you been?" I said, "Maybe I need to tell you something." She says, "Is this where you've been every day for the last 3 weeks?" "Yeah, I guess so." I was stalking this person. I was ready to get my revenge. I didn't, because I went to counseling. I talked to somebody. He also had body image problems. You know. I don't know if it was natural, but because at a very young age, we were rafting in the Gunpowder River, and he fell off a raft, broke his femur, and it cracked his chest cage. But by the time he was 17, he had pigeon chest coming out. Most time pigeon chest is in. It's affecting the heart and lungs, so they do surgery. His was coming out, so he walked around like this with extra large shirts on. And we talked to him about surgery. And he's like, "Oh, no, Dad." By 17, by going into his senior year after he had been raped, he had decided and talked to a doctor without any of us knowing that he was going to get it done. And then finally, the doctor called us up and said, "Hey, are you bringing your son to surgery?" What were you talking about? And that's how we found out that he had self-image problems, because he wouldn't talk to anybody. All he needed to talk to us. Once he did, we supported him. We helped him get the surgery he wanted. Unfortunately, that surgery didn't turn out as good as he had hoped for. It wasn't perfect, the surgery is. So he was still left in that storm a little bit. We talked to him about therapy. He didn't want therapy. He wasn't going to prosecute. He didn't want to have anything that interrupted his senior year, because he wanted to enjoy it and be able to look back on that time fondly and forget about the things that had happened to him. So the following August, he got accepted to James Madison University, great school. Using my VA benefits, he moved to Harrisonburg. By the end of September, he was having suicidal thoughts. He hadn't shared them. We thought he might be, because he was sending some pretty crazy pictures, like standing on the edge of a building like this. And when I said, "Josh, what are you putting that kind of picture up on Facebook for?" He was like, "Oh, Dad, it's just a coming of age thing that they do down at JMU." A picture of him laying in the arms of one of the statues down there that's like 20 feet high. I'm like, "Okay, but you can't put this stuff on Facebook. You're going to worry your mother and your grandmother, and you're already worrying Mom," which is what he called my current wife. You can't do that. Talk to me if you need something. Don't think about who you're impacting. So he finally goes into a counselor, and they call the ER. Take him off the campus to an emergency room. He gets treated. They call us, because now we have to arrange for mental health care. And then he has to find an Uber ride back to the campus from the emergency room. And by the way, we spent many hours looking for mental health care that would match his needs. And in Harrisonburg, Virginia, we couldn't find it. he had to take a 22-minute Uber ride off campus, one way, just to get it to see a therapist. So we knew there's a problem on the campus. There's not enough mental health care. They're not focused on it. Late in that same first semester, he met what I would call his partner, his life mate, because he fell in love and he fell hard. Right? The gentleman happens to be a former Marine, so I kind of liked him. We had good conversations. But he lived in D.C., so he had decided he was going to move to College Park. And so we supported him in that. He moved to College Park. Instead of coming home and going back and forth between houses or living with his mother or myself, he moved in with his partner. Life was great. He came to me and said, Dad, are you going to be married? And I love, Josh, you're 18 years old. You're in college. This is the one time in your life that you can do anything you want and have no responsibility. Do it. Because as soon as you graduate, you're going to have bills. Right? So hopefully you guys are taking advantage of that. Take some little trips. Get out of here. Live your life. Because this is the time to do it. Once you get into life, real life with a job, those opportunities come less for a little while. Because you're trying to build your career. Even this past 4th of July, just 14 days, 24 days before he took his own life, they came up and we had an annual 4th of July party. It was great. He was happy, talking to everybody. Didn't get overly drunk. It was, we had good conversations, and one of which I said, because we were talking about how we homeschool our current daughters, and because of the problems that they had in their schools, I was like, Josh, that's one of the things I always regret, is that I never had those opportunities, because financially I wasn't there when you were that age. And he said, Dad, don't worry about that. He said, I wish I was homeschooled, because I see how they get to play all day long and get to learn, and Anya's smart. But I don't regret the way I grew up. I'm happy with life. This is 24 days before he took his life. I'm going to settle on my first house next week. He had become a real estate agent at the age of 19 and had spent a year developing the craft and was settling the very next week on his house, the first house that he was selling, which he did. And then the night happened, right? The tragedy. 3 o'clock in the morning, bam, 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 my daughter comes running into my bedroom. Her bedroom happens to be over the garage. And she could hear somebody banging on the door. And she told me that the next day after we finally got to talk to her, she had seen lights out there, but couldn't think enough to tell us that. But she ran into the bedroom and said, Mom, Dad, somebody's at the door and they're banging really hard. And we're like, oh, said, they've been there for a while. So of course I jump out of bed and I start putting on a t-shirt and I said, get her back to bed, I'll see what it is. And I got to the top of the steps. And remember, I told you I was a law enforcement officer for 6.5 years, 4 active duty, 2 in the reserves. I've been to crime scenes, I've been to autopsies, I've notified people of death. I've investigated the crimes, I've put people in jail. And when I turn the corner and look over my banister, I can see clearly a detective and a uniformed police officer standing there. I know immediately what I'm going into. Immediately. And my wife started out the door with her. I said, take her in the bedroom. When you got her settled, come down. And I made my way down the steps, and I opened the door after taking a very deep breath. And the officer asked if I'm William Moore. And I said, yes. And he says, may we come in? We have something that we need to tell you. And I said, you tell me. He says, may we come in? We'd rather have you sitting down. I've got 2 older kids who live out of the house that are over 18. I've got a 22-year-old daughter, turns 23 this month, who has had mental health issues that we dealt with, who had been suicidal at one point in life. And I got my son, who seems to be doing great. My first inclination was, oh my God, Candace hurt herself. And then I realized, no, I got 2. It could be either one. Oh my God, come in. Let's take them to the dining room, which is the farthest place from anywhere anybody can hear. And I sit down. And they tell me the news. My son had taken his life. My wife hasn't made it down the steps yet. I asked if If they were sure it was suicide, not homicide. My investigator side come out with it. I had already cognitively distanced both sides of me, the criminal investigator side and the human, emotional father side. I put it away, locked it back away. My wife comes down, and she looks at me, and she says, "What is it?" And I said, "Honey, it's Josh." And she's standing in the door frame, and the next thing I know, she goes, and she grabs both sides of the door frame and holds herself up. And as she thinks she's getting steady, she says, What happened?" I said, "He took his own life." And she falls backwards stumbling into the kitchen, and finally turns around and runs into the living room and collapses, crying. The officer went over there, and I still can't get up. I'm frozen, completely frozen. I want to help her, but I can't. Because to move along that line, I'm going to have to combine the emotional and the investigator in me, and I can't do it. And then why do I tell you this? Because if you're feeling this way, or if you know somebody who's feeling this way at any given moment, you don't want to leave those people who love you in that position. Because my son had a lot of people who loved him. So we finally get my wife, okay, the police finally get him out of the house. The door closes, I walk into the kitchen, and I ball up like a baby in a corner. Because I know I gotta tell everybody else. I gotta call my daughter, her mother, or his mother. I gotta tell the younger siblings, my sisters, everybody in the family. I've gotta let them know. So it takes me about 2 hours to get that courage on, and we started that process. It wasn't easy, but I refused to be the coward. I could have waited and waited until somebody called. I could have asked my wife to do it. Hell, I could have waited till his partner called me and asked him to do it all. Or I could have just went down and hid, had a beer, forgot about it for a little while. But it wasn't making it go away. So I became the buffalo. And I did what I had to do, not only as a father, but as a person who loved him. And an amazing thing happened. Because that very next day, of course, family gathered, but so did his friends. About 10 of them came up. And it ended up that they stayed. His family, his partner's family came in from Indiana and Kentucky and Illinois and stayed with us for days. I had campers parked in my yard, my neighbor's yard, and the whole basement was full of people. People were coming and going all day long. And as they were coming, I began to learn more about my son. I got to learn about him as a person and as a friend and a companion to others, not as a son. Because as a parent, that's how we know them. We're the ones who teach you wrong from right. We tell you what you got to get done every day. We're going to ride you and ride you and ride you until you're successful, because we know that we're the ones who are trying to lift you up. We're going to try to support you when you're down, let you cry on our shoulders when you're crying, and kick you in your butt when you're not meeting expectations, like the military did for me. And when we got to the funeral and wake, I saw all these people who showed up from multiple states, Virginia, Delaware. You know, they were coming in from all over, from people he had met. And I got to talking to them. And as I talked to them, I had people say, you know, I wouldn't be sober if it wasn't for your son. Because my first year at JMU, I was starting to drink again. I'm an alcoholic, but today I'm 3 years sober. And I heard stories like that over and over and over. And the very next weekend after we buried him, I friended every single friend on his Facebook page. I think that's how we got to meet. I friended them because I didn't care what part of his life they were from. I wanted to learn more about him. I wanted to know if he had impacted other people. And I learned that he impacted a lot of people. And I wish that there was some way I could turn back time just long enough in the hours before he made that decision to take his own life, in the seconds, in the minutes, and say, Josh, wake up, look around you. Talk to the people around you because they love you. They care about you. They respect you. Because that's what I heard every day, every time I had a conversation. And I tell that to you now because I want you to do the same. If you know of someone who's feeling bad, if you feel bad yourself, you've got choices. Beat a buffalo. Reach out and get the help and talk to somebody that is a professional to help you through that moment. It's one moment in life. One moment. I saw my son's friends, and I saw a huge bowl. If you could think of it filled with liquid, and that liquid being love, it was overflowing. But I know my son didn't see it that way. I think he saw it as a bunch of shot glasses. Here's a little bit of love over here, here's a little bit of love over here, here's a little bit of love over here. And if he could have poured them all in the bowl that I saw, I don't think he would have pulled that trigger.